I see that attendees have joined, so we can begin.
All right. Afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order Committee of the Whole meeting number 208 for October 6th. And in honor of the Liuwatu'ul, the Village of Pemberton acknowledges that we are meeting within the unceded territory of the Liuwa Nation. This meeting of the committee is being held virtually, with all meeting participants attending via electronic communications in order to adhere to the provincial health officer's orders respecting physical distancing requirements as a measure to prevent the transmission of COVID-19. Committee members will be involved in and participate in the meeting virtually as they would in person. For those members of the public in attendance, please note that this meeting is a live webinar and is being recorded. The recording of the meeting will be available on the village's website following the meeting. Council members attending the meeting are required to verbally advise the chair of when they leave the meeting and return to the meeting so that this can be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. For clarity, if a council member does not verbally advise the chair but is observed to be absent from their video feed for an extended period of time and their video feed remains turned on, and it is unclear to staff whether they are present in the meeting, the council member will be marked absent from the meeting until such time as staff observes the council member to reappear in the video feed. And with that, I will ask if there are any amendments to the agenda. Seeing none, could I get a motion to approve the agenda? Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Zant. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Adoption of minutes from Committee of the Whole meeting 207 from Tuesday, September 15th. Oh, go ahead, Ms. Fraser.
If we could just point out, unfortunately, when we did the minutes, we had the wrong Committee of the Whole meeting date on the minutes. It should be from the meeting minutes, the previous minutes should be a Committee of the Whole meeting number 206, not 205. And it should be September 1st, not April 7th. So just on the first page of the minutes. So if we could have the minutes adopted as amended would be appropriate.
Thank you. Can I get that motion? Councillor Craddock, seconded by Councillor Tonelli. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
And that takes us into our delegation. Is Mr. Boyd on hand?
Yep. Ellie, could you also ask or bring Jill in?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Hi, Jill.
Hi, Jill.
Hi, Joe.
Hi. Bobby, are you there and can you hear us?
Still muted.
Hi, guys. Sorry about
Hello.
that.
That's all
Having
good.
some technical difficulties. No, my earphones are not working, so we'll move on without them.
Realities of Zoom. Well, I just wanted, staff thought it would be important to invite Bobby Boyd, who's the new manager of Pemberton Children's Center, to Committee of the Whole to speak to some of the current challenges around daycare. It's certainly not new to the committee or council for that matter, with respect to childcare shortages and challenges there, but also to sort of speak to some of the extraordinary circumstances that COVID has also presented to childcare and to the Children's Center. So yeah, we thought it would be a good idea for Bobby to come and speak to sort of what's happening in the center now, what is some of his challenges, and perhaps some of the things that potentially the village could assist with in terms of advocacy and other things. So Bobby, if you're comfortable, if you wanted to sort of just provide, sort of the current situation at the Children's Center and some of the challenges you're facing, that would be great and very helpful.
Right. Well, thank you for the invite to, sorry, I'm losing my voice, share with you guys today. So challenges, COVID is definitely a challenge. We follow all our guidelines from Coastal Health, and we've been able to kind of, I don't want to use the word, stay ahead of COVID. Like our challenge is keeping colds out and symptoms out, and 3 weeks ago, every symptom that would come to the daycare would be referred to 811, and almost every child or parent that was referred to 811 was referred for a COVID test. We haven't had anyone call back and say tested positive for COVID, which is a good thing. And as the weeks have gone on now, with what the school boards are doing too, is sore throats and runny noses have changed. So therefore, schools and daycares are allowed to take in a runny nose or a sore throat. So for us, that's not a good thing, because we're pretty much full capacity with the children in each room. But where our issue comes into is staffing and having enough staff to do ratios and be able to offer the care to children. So when we allow, say, a runny nose in that, isn't, the family's done their due diligence, they've had a COVID test, it's not COVID, the medical has said safe to come in, but we let a child in with a runny nose. Well, that runny nose turns into a cold, and then we have one of our staff sick, and then we're in trouble, because right now we have every staff that is cleared or healthy working to keep our ratios up, and so we can continue to have enough kids. And we just had a week of 2 weeks ago, we had where we had 9 of our staff out because we let a runny nose in that developed into a head cold, and overnight had 9 staff out for sickness. And we got, I want to say lucky, but at the same time, our kids also had the same head cold kind of go through them. So the numbers were reduced. So it helped us with the numbers reduced, because then we didn't actually have to close a room. We had enough staff to make it through. But going forward, that might not happen again. So that's the biggest concern, is how do we keep our seasonal cold and flu season, which is coming, out the door, so we don't have a spot where we lose staff. When talking to our licensing officer, we've heard that a lot of the daycares in the Sea to Sky have reduced numbers, but that's been by parent choice with this COVID. We don't have that same situation. We still have a huge wait list, and as fast as someone chooses to, if something comes up and they don't need daycare, we have someone in that spot right away. So that's not an option for us, but it's been recommended that we plan to reduce numbers to help out with lack of staffing. But we choose, as the Pemberton Children's Center, not to be in that position, because how do you decide that? How do you decide? Do we bring back the emergency care program, or how do you decide who stays and goes? But it's a real reality that we are facing, is if we can't find more staff to cover staff away sick, the alternative is closing a room, which means everybody loses out on care. So that's sort of a little bit of a summary. This is open up to questions. It might be easier just to, if anyone has questions, or I can keep babbling.
It's up to you there, Mr. Boyd. If you have more to provide us, please go ahead. It's certainly not babbling. It's good information, but if you prefer, we could just go into questions. It's up to you. Councillor Craddock, did you have your hand?
Yeah, Bobby, you never mentioned how many students per room and how many staff would you require?
You're on mute.
There we go. All right. Yeah, good question. So by licensing, we have 3 rooms. We have crickets, beetlebugs, and dragonflies. So crickets is our littlest ones, and we're licensed for 12 children in that room. Beetlebugs is 12 children. That's our middle age, and then 3 to 5 year olds, which is our dragonflies, can have 25. For numbers, for ratios, the minimum we can have is 3 teachers in each room. Ideally, like when you can imagine 12 children that are just learning to crawl and have different sleep schedules and all the other things that comes up with being a baby. We've always tried to schedule a minimum 4 in that room, but for licensing, it's only 3. And during that time when we had staff sick, we had to do it with 3, which makes it a challenge.
Thank you.
If you had 4, let's say ideally you had 4 in that room, and then you need 3 in the other 2 rooms, that's 10 staff. How many staff do you have when everybody's healthy?
12 is our average, like when everyone's healthy. We've got 12 staff in rooms, and then management in the office.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, ideally we have 4 in each room. It's, and there's things that happen with like being in a pandemic is we have all these, questions that we do to keep, keep wellness and illness out. So at 7:30 in the morning, there's a lineup, and we have to go through those things. So it ties up a staff. And if you go down the questions and you have one family that has just returned from a flight from Ontario, or has questions, or has an illness, and you want to spend the time to, give the best advice and help that family out, and that will take a staff member aside, our management. So it's COVID is having a pandemic is kind of changed the roles of staff. And it's just something to note, like normally, I mean, I joined as a manager in July, so I kind of came in mid-pandemic, but I've learned from staff before all this stuff is the job has changed. Now we've added, like there's hand washing, there's sanitizing, there's bleaching, there's cleaning, there's all these things that we have to do to, keep COVID out and keep wellness in. And it just adds to the workload of, you imagine if there's only 3 in a room with 12 kids, and with all the cleaning and all that stuff, it makes it harder.
Yeah, for sure. In a couple minutes, I'll maybe give you a little bit of an update on some of this work that we're doing at the village towards childcare, but and maybe talk about how the village could support you. But I'll keep it open for questions right now. Councillor Zant, did you have your hand? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just curious, Bobby. First off, thank you for the work that your group does there. It's absolutely amazing. And every child benefits from going to that center for sure. Specifically, you've come to the village, but is there something specific that you're looking for? Are you looking for advocacy, help with information? I'm just curious, what do you have an ask?
Yeah, there's a sort of a bigger picture. I know recently the village was part of, before I was here, but a project to get possibly new space. And I don't, all my years in, EC and early years and was on Vancouver Island, but I think it's relevant to this area too, is space isn't the issue. And I don't know how to change that, that seems to be where there's any money or funding is towards new space, because everyone has the same problem. I've been part of projects where we've built beautiful daycare space and had plenty of room, but where it comes down to is we can't staff it. And it's really hard to staff it. You could have the most beautiful place in the place, but you can't staff it. Right now, a lot of our staff that we do get in this area are staff that are coming from Japan or Korea and so on. And that seems to be the most interest. And a lot of time it's just because they want to live in Canada. It's really hard to find qualified staff to work here. And the issue is, if we look at the average pay for someone starting out as an ECE or a childcare worker, it's low. And we're competing against, like, through this whole pandemic, you made more money on CERB than you did working. So, why would people go to work, if they can get paid more on CERB? It was hard to get people to come back. It wasn't the situation for this daycare. Most of the staff we have here love their job and love the children and want to work, which is bonus. But I would love to see the focus towards, and I don't know where it would be, but we really need to recognize early educators as teachers, as educators, and pay them accordingly, and pay them at least to the economy that they live in. Because we're competing against, I hear it all the time. As soon as I get people interested in working here, and what I hear is, well, I can go and work in Whistler, get paid, almost $10 more by hour by answering the phone, and benefits and a ski pass. That's what we're competing with, and no risk. They're not asked to be in a room full of children that, could be a potential risk for their health. There does seem to be a lot of opportunities for training, and we've got budgets for that. Like, there's lots of opportunities for people to get their EC and get training, but at the end of it, no one's signing up for these things, because I can go to school for a period of time, get all this stuff, but my entry-level job is anywhere from 18 to 20 bucks an hour. And after 4 years, and they can go work for a place for 4 years and they will make 22 bucks an hour. So it's hard. Anyway, I don't know who or what person can make big change in that, but I think the government has to stop putting money into new spaces and put more money towards actually recognizing them as teachers. And
So Bob, I got you, Councillor Zant. We did a childcare needs assessment and had a bunch of recommendations. And as you know, we applied for a grant for new spaces, and we're continuing to do so, recognizing that staffing is still number one issue. One of the recommendations that we're working on, like you said, is training opportunities and how to get free training, how to get local training. But totally hear you on the wage side, and it's something we've talked about before. I had a meeting with the Minister for Childcare 2 weeks ago to talk about all the challenges of childcare in Pemberton and the fact that we need some support. And that was a big part of the conversation was, as a starting point, we need to figure out a way that these childcare workers can make a proper wage for the very big job that they do. And it doesn't cost the parents at this point, because daycare is already fairly expensive for a lot of parents. It's even unaffordable. So the government's got to come up with a way to supplement it. So, they cited the recent increases by $1 or $2 an hour over the last year and a half, whatever it was. But, as we responded, or as I responded, that's nowhere near sufficient. And like you're saying, why would somebody make a career out of this as opposed to just sort of an entry-level job, which it shouldn't be. So totally hear you on that. We're going to continue to advocate with the Minister for Childcare and whoever else at a provincial level, or MLA, and whoever else we can get into their ear on this one, because we totally agree. And that's where it's got to come from. There's got to be a level of subsidization for daycare at a provincial level that will help pay some of these wages and training opportunities so that it's feasible. So we hear you, and we'll continue advocating. If you ever know of a way or an avenue for us to do that, let me know for sure. But we'll continue to do it at a provincial level every chance we get.
Appreciate it.
Councillor Zant, did you want to follow up?
Yeah, just one thing I want to ask Bobby is when you mentioned that you have a lot of international educators coming to you. Are there certificates transferable to Canada?
Yes, some depends. I mean, there's they can be trained in other places for sure.
Okay, I'm just was looking at it from a training standpoint, if there was a point of advocacy there, but if it's transferable, then maybe is there countries that aren't transferable that could be? Just trying to think of the training side of things.
Yeah, it's a good question. I imagine there are, like, I have reached out and I want to continue to reach out to like some of the training facilities here, and that's one way to staff is I've done that in the past on the island, and where you reach out to training things and offer their practicum here, right? Or even a partnership where people can be trained here, because it is a wonderful place to live and it's a wonderful place to work. And maybe that's one way to maybe get qualified staff in to support.
Well, we again, we're working with, there's a woman on another one of our committees who works with Work BC, and she's helped sort of bring some training opportunities to our attention, and some of them like might even be funding for it, so the training's free. So if you're aware at any point of people that are interested in the training and we can make it more accessible, that's something we can definitely try to coordinate or bring Work BC and yourselves together. So if you're ever aware of that, if you know there are people out there that would be keen on receiving the training, please let us know and we can help set that up.
Great.
Any other questions for Mr. Boyd?
I have one more.
Yeah, go ahead.
As I'm listening to this, I keep on thinking of new things, but wondering with the being able to fulfill your staff spots when people are sick, is there, or do you know of any company out there that does a co-op for ECEs? I know in other sectors they're having, like my friend's a pharmacist. She works for a company that just basically contracts her out to different pharmacies. Is there something similar for ECEs?
There isn't that I know of. I have reached out to colleagues and friends I know, like that due to COVID had all their staff laid off, like even the adaptive snow sports and things like that, and ones that haven't gone back to full work, and reached out to them. The issue is how we're licensed. We can't technically pay someone an EC salary, which is anywhere between $18 and $20 an hour, depending on their years. So most people would start with us at what they call a responsible parent program, which is a pretty easy program to take, and we can sponsor and pay for that. But they're only going to be making $15 an hour. And as soon as that comes up out of my wealth, we lose them. Right. No one's going to want to come into a room, and during these times anyway, and work for that. That's the hard part. I know of, there is some daycares that are kind of looking at this area opening, and they're advertising right now, and their wage is quite higher than ours. But they're in the same thing. Even with raising their wage, they can't find people. There's a lack of people signing up and lining up to take courses. And even if with the subsidies, and there has been for a while now, like free training towards becoming an ECE, but people just are not signing up for it.
Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead, Joe.
Bobby, you kind of touched on this in one of our earlier conversations, but I was just wondering if you could just speak about, I guess, the lack of funding or support should the center need to close for a temporary basis, whether there's an outbreak or you don't have enough staffing, because that might also be an advocacy piece that we could help you with as well.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, at the beginning of this, there was emergency funding. And so there was government support, so lack of revenue and things like that we could apply for. But as of August 31st, all of that has been pulled back or stopped. So there is not really any support if I give you a scenario that almost happened 2 weeks ago, where we didn't have enough staff, and we asked the community for help. Because we get the phone calls of, well, it's just a runny nose, my kid gets a runny nose all week. all summer or all winter. It could be a runny nose. And at some point, we can't be charging families for space that they're not receiving. And a lot of families did offer to help. Like, we want to help you. We don't want colds. Families getting tired of being referred to 811 and having to go through a COVID test, all that kind of stuff. So they're choosing to keep their kids home, which for us, that could be at some point, if they're choosing to keep their kids home, they're not going to be paying for their enrollment or for their fees. And at some point we can't charge that. So then we're in a position where, what do we do here? Because we're currently crunching numbers to find out what our minimum it is to operate. It's a scary time because we're still, this is early cold and flu, right? It's October, and we're hoping that with all the hand washing and all the precautions we're doing, we'll be ahead of it and we'll have less sickness. But if we're in a spot like that and have to reduce numbers, there is no support. And talking to our licensing officer and hearing about some other daycares, she can't really share which ones, but they are the Sea to Sky, so not too far away. They have closed, and some of them don't know about opening, where they've had to close for 2 weeks, clean their place out, then open again, and then have to close again. And there's a point where the revenue just isn't there, and without support, that's not a great place to be financially. There is some stuff that can help out with if any of our staff are sick with or come in contact with COVID or have to isolate for 15 days, but it's very minimum. It isn't very much money, and it's only for a few weeks. So if you know any other government or any kind of support that can help through, please send my way. Well, we'll look at it, but right now there isn't any support. Financial support has been pulled and changed. And we still have, like, one of the things that just aware in this community is when COVID first had the first lockdown, we were mandated to only provide care for emergency care workers and had protocol to follow. As of August 31st, we had to turn all those people away because we were mandated to tell them, sorry, we no longer can give them care, and went back to our wait list. So there's a big handful of people out there that live in this community that were getting care, that needed care. And these are essential workers that, doctors and nurses and all that stuff that are not receiving care right now, and the government is not supporting that. And what I'm hearing from other daycares is some are talking about bringing that program back on their own, but then what happens to all the kids that are in care right now that have been waiting years to get in here? We're just going to tell them to go home again, and so we only can help a handful. They're hard decisions, hard times, and there is no financial support that I know of right now. I don't know if that answered it, Jill, but
Councillor Craddock?
Yeah, thanks. Bobby, I'm not familiar with the structure for a fee for a parent to bring a child in. Can you give us a rough idea for what the cost is?
So a drop-in per day is $77 for drop-in. Full day is $55. If you're in crickets or beetle bugs, 5 days a week is $1,091. If you're in dragonflies, it's $884. So those are our fees. Our fees have increased as of September a little bit to help hopefully bring up our salaries here, so they're at least on par with other places. And then every family, we put every family through subsidy, apply for subsidy. So yeah.
So that fee you gave me, $1,091 and $881, is that per month?
That's per month. Yeah.
Per month. Okay.
Yeah, and that's if somebody, that's what someone would pay in full fees if they didn't get any government subsidy.
And how much are the subsidies?
subsidies will. Yeah, but do some get like a full? No.
Yeah, some get full, some get $50. Yeah.
Yeah, they vary, right? They vary. Some get like $50 and some get full. It really depends. Like they look at, I guess, a whole bunch of factors, right? What the annual income is per family and all that stuff. So it
Okay.
varies.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Mr. Boyd,
just-
thank you. Go ahead.
Sorry, just Ted, with, it's a good thing it's a good question with fees, and that's sort of the danger of if we don't find support for daycares like the Pemberton Children's Center, which I think there's still a fee, and they are hard for a lot of families. But the alternative is if we don't find support, the daycares that are starting to open, their fees are quite higher. Your danger of going private where, yes, they pay better and they have better things for salary, but that's off the backs of parents that are going to be paying more for their care. I hear it all the time where people are like, well, I can't go here. I get more as a nanny, you're competing with that. People go and get their EC and then they get a job as a nanny where they're getting $26 an hour per child. And that's what we're competing with. And if we don't find a way to support like daycares like the Pemberton Children's Center, that's where it's going to move. It'll be all private and people will pay a lot more and they won't get the subsidy so much.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes, Ryan.
Mayor Richmond, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just curious, since we're on the subject of subsidies and wages, to, what are the teachers, what would a fair wage, in your opinion, and Mayor Richmond, please chime in if you know, what's a fair wage for an EC, or what would be considered a fair wage? Because the idea I'm getting here is that their maximum wage now is not enough. I don't know the wages, so that's why I'm asking, but what, in your opinion, what would a fair wage be?
In an ideal world, it would be nice to treat them as educators and look at what a school teacher makes.
Which is?
Anywhere between 24 to start up to 28, I think is on average. I think when you look at the economy and where Pemberton is, I would like to see like the starting wage around 24 and going up over the years. You guys are all aware of this, we're in a catchment that is a little bit more costly to live. Families have everything from housing to rent to, food costs here and so on. So I know that's not how we decide on minimum wage in Canada, but for this area, for people to actually run a home and stuff, they need to be in that bracket. And it's also just trying to, it's hard one because you're competing with, we live right next door to a world-renowned resort, right? We live next door to Whistler, and all these people in the service industry, they make anywhere between $24 and $28 an hour. And that's your competition. So if you want to recruit people to this area, you gotta be in the same ballpark.
Thank you.
Agreed. Okay, Mr. Boyd, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate that. We also appreciate the work you're doing, and we know it's challenging times. So happy to have this communication. Again, we'll keep our eyes open for opportunities to do whatever advocacy we can do on your behalf. And if there's anything specific that you feel the village can support you in, please reach out again.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to number 5, changes to the provincial name, flag, and coat of arms discussion. Councillor Noble, did you want to maybe lead off? I know this is of interest to you.
Yes, so everybody's seen Ben Parr's letter, which we received, and there's a copy with the current agenda also, which pretty much sums it up. quite nicely. And so since it's come to us, I kind of feel that as elected officials, we need to do our part to boost discussion and potential actions of inclusiveness and reconciliation to the next level, which, as I see it, would be crafting a resolution to take to the next UBCM.
The next step would probably be actually to take it through your local government association. So the LMLGA would probably be the first spot if that's the direction you want it to go.
Oh yeah, okay.
Okay. Anybody else like to jump in here?
Sorry, I'm just trying to pull up the.
Go ahead,
agenda.
Councillor Antonelli.
It's 6.
Councillor Antonelli, go ahead.
Yeah, I had quite a few interesting conversations about this, and I think that there's a lot of support. People think that it's a very interesting concept, and there's a lot of meaning, you know, behind what the writers said there. A couple of concerns that came up was, well, not really concerns, just ideas. Is that one, people want to know what the alternatives are before they put their, you know, name behind wanting to change the name. They'd like to know, you know, change it to what? That was one of the questions. And then the other question was whether this was a priority during the pandemic. And yeah, so that was the gist of the conversations that I've had.
Thank you. Anybody else? I mean, I certainly, as both the councillors just said, I think there's a lot of truths in the letter. I think there's no, in my opinion, no denying the colonialist undertones or overtones of our flag and our name. It's there. The history is there in the name. So I think it's a pretty interesting concept. I certainly think it's an interesting and maybe really strong step towards reconciliation. I don't know what it looks like. Maybe it is, as Councillor Nova says, the first step to go through our government association and get the conversation going. That's why I asked you to see, Councillor Nova, if there was any discussion at this past UBCM that you saw.
I went through the resolution book and didn't find anything.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's often where you'll see where something like this, which is a significant change, obviously, that conversation often starts at UBCM and moves up into the province over a period of time. So I mean, I support the direction. I'm ready to entertain a motion if you'd like to make one.
I would. I'm not sure exactly how to craft that yet. I was hoping to get some input. I mean, obviously there is no name chosen. That would be a whole process, which is beyond us. Our part in this is just boosting it up to that next level of conversations with local government, including Indigenous ones. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure there'd be a whole process. So I was wondering if anybody has input on what that might look like.
Well, it's a new one to me for sure. I'm not sure what kind of process that would be, but I guess to keep it somewhat general, I guess it would be a resolution or a motion to bring a resolution to LMLGA that our local government associations and UBCM work with the provincial government to consider changing the name and flag of British Columbia to something other, something less colonialist. I think
something
would be
more
sort of the general.
inclusive.
Yeah. So I think that would be the general resolution or the motion to send for that kind of resolution. Go ahead, Councillor Zant.
I was just going to say, I'd be curious to hear what, you know, I never had a chance to talk to a lot of the public in town about this, but I would be curious to hear what LGMA and UBCM and just see what the general opinion is. I can only speak for myself, but like to say, in saying that, it would be interesting to hear what the general opinion is of the public throughout the province. Mm. That's my only opinion on it. I think I'm just old-fashioned when I say I don't know. Always known it as British Columbia. But I'm not objective to change, and I think there is definitely some things that should change. And if this helps in reconciliation, then, like I said, I would like to hear the other opinions out there for sure.
I would assume that whatever process the government associations took with the province would include a lot of public input. I don't know. Again, I don't know how this process would look, and it's a big change, and there's a cost to it too, for sure. And that's the part I would tend to agree with in terms of, is this the right time during a pandemic? For us, there's no work for our staff or anything involved here. We don't have to worry about it from that end, but there would be a cost to the province to do this. Having said that, we're, on for sure a smaller scale, but we watched Queen Charlotte Islands become Haida Gwaii, and many of us forget that it was Queen Charlotte Islands now, so it certainly can be done. So I assume there will be a lot of public engagement on it, but I would leave that to the government associations to deal with. So, I mean, I think there's interest from Councillor Noble to move this forward a little bit. I think the government association, again, is the right place for the discussion to your point, Councillor Zant, see if there's more interest from councils and residents across the province to really engage in this process. So did my potential resolution make sense there, Ms. Fraser? Did you catch sort of what I said?
What I got that, well, it would be a recommendation from the Committee of the Whole to Council to bring a resolution to LMLGA and UBCM that our local governments work with the province to change the name and flag and coat of arms of British Columbia.
Does that sound like a motion you want to make, Councillor Noble? Or?
Wondering if it's too direct, or if we should be making a resolution to start the process of
discussion?
Yeah, discussion, including with Indigenous communities to get input, rather than going straight to the top. I think there's steps to take in the process.
Okay.
Including consultation.
Councillor Antonelli?
I was just going to say, Sheena, I think the mayor's resolution was to consider changing the name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, consider.
Councillor Craddock?
Yeah, it's not that I'm against the idea. I just think the cost and the time for staff to do this at this time just doesn't fit what I see as a priority for the community over childcare and kindergarten spaces and other things that we're working on that are more important, I think, to the community than looking at this and maybe spending time and money putting this forward. I think we have to pick our battles, and I just don't see this as a priority for me in our community at this time.
What resources and money are we talking about? I mean, we're talking about sending a resolution to the local government association, and that's it. There's no cost attached. There's no real work from staff beyond forwarding the resolution. What are you referring to?
Well, I'm referring to the fact that Councillor Noble has suggested that we need to get together with the First Nations and have conversations.
Well, not us. Were you referring to us, Councillor Noble, or are you talking about it at the government, at provincial level?
The government level.
Yeah, not us.
Okay, well, that's a little different. It sounded like she was putting that on us to start doing that, and
no,
we don't have the time and resources to do that type of thing.
No. Go ahead,
also,
Councillor Noble.
Sorry, bringing this up just after UBCM also means we have a whole year to work on this resolution. We don't need to put anything else aside for it. We'll find somewhere, I think, in a year's time.
So how about we do this then? How about we get a motion to bring this back prior to the next LMLGA, so that we could be ready to put forth a resolution at that time. And that way we could, it might change the resolution between now and then as well, right? And hearing the conversation around the province. So yeah, a motion to bring this back prior to the next LMLGA conference to prepare a potential resolution.
I can second that.
Moved by Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Craddock. Any further discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks for bringing it back up, Councillor Noble.
Thank you.
Recreation site naming discussion.
Hey.
Gilmore, did you want to preface this?
I'll just touch on it very briefly. So in the report provided in the agenda today, I just prepared a little bit of a quick history on when the recreation site transferred to the village. And then I also identified some of the generous contributions that we've received for all of the different amenities that we currently have at the recreation site at this time. The first two soccer fields I put in here, those are committed funding and they're projects that we are actually moving ahead with. The baseball diamond field fill, that has been completed, but we haven't yet confirmed. I just need to go back and reassess the survey markers and to provide that officially to Sunstone. And then as the Porka Bike Skills Park funding application, that is also pending, as we discussed that at the last council meeting. So I also attached on this, the reason this is coming forward at this time is that we did receive a request from Rotary, which I did attach to the report, where they've requested consideration from council for naming the amenity building after their group. And so there also are other amenities here, and I thought it would be a good opportunity, and council did when we had some preliminary discussion on considering what naming for all of the amenities out there might look like. So I did put some information. The only other bylaw, or I guess formality we have for naming at the village is for our road naming bylaw. And so it talks about naming roads, which we could consider as well for these amenities or parks, recreation amenities, reference to local pioneers, flora, fauna, native plants, local animals, to have significance to history of the Pemberton Valley and First Nation traditional history. 3, names of residents who have achieved remarkable success in their field at the local, provincial, federal, or international levels, or connected to the community as a whole. And then there's a reference to the industrial park that I don't really think is applicable here. Typically in the past, what we'd had is a resolution that was a standing resolution of council for naming, I think it was parks, I can't recall. It should be here. Is Sheena there? No. Is she coming on?
Yes, it's for parks.
Okay. So the last item I just wanted to touch on is typically what we've done as far as funding for these amenities for any applicant portion or shortfall that we've had is that we've dealt with this at the PVIS level as we jointly, as the village manages recreation, but as far as funding and new amenities, et cetera, we do consider that at the PVIS table. So there's maybe wanting to know council's idea on how we consider them when we're naming these assets. So I've also attached the site concept that we have at this point, which identifies the amenities we have. We have sort of a held area for the Bike Skills Park, which will be further developed once we receive the grant funding, and then we can add a little bit more detail onto that. So I just put all of this out here for discussion with council. So where I was going with the resolution is we don't necessarily have to bring forward a bylaw or policy. We can, if council would prefer. We could also keep a resolution on how we would consider naming of these amenities. The other thing that I did reference that was brought up to me is in a lot of communities, typically naming isn't after a business. So I did.
What was the last bit? Typically what?
Amenities aren't named after a business. Being named more after a person or some of the other items that I mentioned earlier.
Okay, thank you for that. I don't think we need personally to bring a bylaw for it. I think a standing resolution would suffice in this situation. You know, when we look at the site plan or when we consider the whole thing, what do we have to name? We have the amenities building. Eventually we'll have a complex. There's the fields, there's the whole site. So I'm just wondering, you know, and I agree, like not naming after a business, you know, as much as those community amenity contributions from Sunstone and the Ridge are key and appreciated, I don't know that there should be naming after that because they are private enterprises. So, you know, just thinking about some of the contributors that we would potentially like to acknowledge in naming What do we have to name when we really think about it? Like, are we naming the fields? Are we naming the site? Are we naming, the skills park might have? Because it's kind of interesting to consider when we're allocating, right?
Well, obviously you could name the whole site. Typically what we've done, and the reason that we placed the naming of Pemberton District Recreation Site is that's the name of our, the community center. We've just kept it the same, Pemberton and District Community Center, just indicating that we're both in this together, basically, as far as recreation is concerned. And so I would say, yes, we should name the fields. People are going to say, well, you're going to go to, what do you want to see, field 1, field 2? You could say, okay, this group you set up in X field, whatever the name might be, and you go to Y field, there would be a baseball diamond. And I think, Pork has invested a lot in the Bike Skills Park. That could be, you could name it after another individual. I would maybe, until we get grant funding, kind of wait maybe on a decision there, but the 2 fields for sure. And then I would consider, once we get the remaining dollars, to do the infrastructure portion of the softball or baseball diamond, that we could go through a naming convention there. So yeah, the field house and the 2 fields at this point. And if council so desires, I guess the entire site, if that's something that you'd like to see.
Okay, because that definitely opens up the conversation a little bit, right? It's not like we're competing for one naming right, so to speak. And it will give us the opportunity to acknowledge, our main contributors potentially, like Mr. Blackcomb Foundation, Rotary Club, Dendoff family, might also factor into our street naming conversation that we're going to have eventually as well. So, okay, I'm going to leave it there and open it up to council. Councilor Craddock.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mayor Richmond. A couple things I had a look at on page 11, where it's stated that staff would further suggest including a provision that village assets not be named after a business. I think that maybe takes away from this council and future council's opportunity to maybe make some money off of naming a field, and maybe it's a 3 or 5 year term where I'm just going to pick something. Maybe the Whitecaps come in and say, look, we'll give you $100,000 over the next 3 or 5 years. We'll name that field that, and we'll come up and use it and have classes for kids on the site. There's an opportunity to take some dollars in that will save the taxpayers some money and help the field. So I guess when I looked at that portion, I thought, well, I'd like to see that removed from that suggestion, because somebody in the future may see the opportunity to make a fair big dollar on this. And you see lots of communities you go into where a sports complex has got the Coca-Cola building or the Bank of Nova Scotia, and they get big money from that. So I'm not against looking at that. It's not going to ruin my day if we don't, but I'd just like to see us consider that. The other thing that came up is when I looked at the street naming and how we were supposed to come up with it, and yet we took a company name and named Sabre Way. So, we went against what we were saying we were going to do to start with. So I think there's some issues we need to take a look at there. Maybe we made a mistake with Sabre Way, and maybe that should be on a different site or different area, or maybe it should be removed altogether. And I think if we did something like, if it's a recreation complex, why can't it just be by the good donation of the Dendoff family? So I guess I'd like to look at a couple of those issues before we move forward on this.
Actually, go ahead first, Ms. Gilmore.
No, that's okay. I'm good. Thank you, though.
So that's a good segue. Before we get into actually, discussing whether we're naming the building after whatever, to Councillor Craddock's concerns there, that's sort of why I felt that I didn't want to bring a naming bylaw forward for a recreation site. I think it's too restrictive.
Yeah.
And I think we can consider what we're considering right now without a bylaw to guide us on this. I mean, unfortunately, we don't have that many recreation assets that we're going to be naming, although, there's more and more coming, hopefully, but not enough that I feel requires a bylaw to guide it. I think we can do it sort of on a case-by-case basis depending on how we get to wherever we get to with these assets, right? So maybe before we get into the naming, let me just ask that question of the committee. Is there a desire to actually have a naming bylaw for our recreation sites, or are we good to do this as a standing resolution and on a case by case?
I would go with the standing resolution and a case by case, as you suggested, Mayor Richmond.
Councillor Zant?
I was just going to say the same as yourself and Councillor Craddock. I agree.
Okay, I see nodding heads, so let's consider that. And on this case, in this case, again, we have, let's look at it, who we definitely want to acknowledge through this. Obviously, the Rotary, it's something that they're very keen on, and I respect that. A, it's a big donation, and B, it's a way of keeping the Rotary name present and out there for youth, and hopefully encourage recruitment for the Rotary Club over the years. So I think it's important to them, obviously. I think we would like to acknowledge the Whistler Blackcomb Foundation and the Dendoff family somewhere all within this complex. Are we in agreement with that, or is there more we would like to acknowledge, or is everybody sort of on page with those three, contributors? Councillor Zant?
Yeah, I agree with you, Mayor Richmond. I feel the Rotary, as Councillor Craddock has said in the past, has been a huge contributor to our community. The one question I did have, though, is when they mentioned the $40,000, I believe it was, for the amenity building, is that a term or is that a one-time payment for the amenities building?
It's a one-time payment. They would contribute that towards
Right.
the construction of the amenity. It's factored into the budget.
Thank you. That's, like I said, I agree with yourself and Councillor Craddock on this.
So maybe just to get the conversation rolling a little further, would we like to consider perhaps the amenities building being named in some respect for the Rotary, and then considering the fields for Whistler Blackcomb and Dendoff, or maybe the Dendoff is the site and Bike Park we wait on? Go ahead, Councillor Antonelli.
I do like the idea of keeping the name of the entire site, Pemberton and District, just because it's a good descriptor. That said, I think it's very important to have the Dendoff name on something, particularly in context of the road naming discussions we've been having. I'm supportive of the Rotary having their name on the concession building. And Whistler Blackcomb, I certainly they need acknowledgement, but I'm not sure they need a specific amenity named after them, because there may be, I'm not sure about this, but there could be less of a personal connection to a specific amenity. Yeah, so those are my comments.
Thank you. I tend to agree with all that. I mean, it could be maybe the amenities building is named after Rotary, and it's the Dendoff Fields. And it says Field A and Field B for tournament play. I agree with your, calling the site something that's actually descriptive or a good descriptor. So maybe we consider. We already have an acknowledgement board up there, but as we continue to build, we can improve that. We just call it the Dendoff Fields and the Rotary Amenities Building. Go ahead, Ms. Gilmer.
I just, as a thought, I potentially, would the committee be opposed to, say, naming the first field after the Dendoff, and then we could consider naming the second field after another group? I just don't know if we need to name them both after. I'm not saying that they have any less value. I'm just saying, do we want to go, it just could be a better identifier. Mrs. Dendoff was there for the ribbon cutting for the first soccer field. It's up to the committee, to recommend to council. I'm not opposed, but it could allow us to include additional potential funders. The whole site is long from being completed. Just a thought I'll throw out there.
Yeah, I feel like as we move along and get funding for the next stages, if we could acknowledge generosity within those next stages. I'm kind of like the idea of just naming them both the fields, the Dendoff Fields, or something along those lines. But I'm open to. Councillor Craddock, did you have your hand?
Yeah, thanks very much, Mayor Richmond. Now, I guess when I was looking at the sign that we've got out there and the contribution of the whole site by the Dendoff family, to reduce that huge contribution to the community down to a single field seems to take away from the gift that was given to the community. So as much as I don't want to see us break it down, I mean, I know when we open our meetings, we mention we're on the unceded territory of the Lillooet Nation. Why can't we look at something where when we talk about the Pemberton and District Recreation Site, we say on land donated by the Dendoff family? And that's just a thought, but I've been thinking a lot about that, thinking without that contribution, we are nowhere as far as recreation in the community. And I don't see a bigger gift to the community than that. And in my mind, I certainly want to reduce that down to one field as recognition of that contribution. So just my thoughts on it.
What about calling it both the fields, like it's the Dendoff soccer fields or play area or whatever?
And again, I'm open to suggestions. I just think it still reduces down a 15-hectare site to 2 play fields when it maybe isn't significant towards the naming of the whole site. So I'm open. I don't know if we're going to resolve this today or we should bring some other folks in to help us with this. It just it's a tough one.
Councillor Zanth and Councillor Noble.
I was just, further to Councillor Craddock's point, has anybody talked to the Dendoffs? I mean, maybe they have an opinion on what they want their name put on. Like, maybe they are happy with the 2 fields. Maybe they're like, well, we did donate land. We feel it should be named after our family. I just wondering what they think of this.
I think that might be a little bit of an awkward conversation.
Okay.
What would you like for naming rights? I think we should try to come up with something that we feel is reflective of their donation, and hopefully and then go to them for sure and make sure they feel good about it. But I wouldn't ask them what they want.
And I would agree with Councillor Craddock. Sorry, Nikki, Ms. Gilmore. I was just going to say, without that donation, we wouldn't be here talking about this right now. So.
I can just go back to that. I think that following this conversation, that's when we would reach out to the family.
Yeah.
This was sort of the kickoff sort of discussion on where we wanted to go, and then we would reach out. Yeah.
If we come up with some ideas here today, which hopefully we do, then it would be to go back to Rotary and go back to the Dendoffs and whatever else we decide. Councillor Noble.
I was thinking it would be nice and appropriate to name the future sports complex after them. However, the only issue with that is I wouldn't want to see them wait potentially 20 years or who knows how long until that materializes.
Yeah, that I agree. I mean, that would be, that building itself, like Councillor Antonella said, calling it the what it's currently called, the whole site, but that building could be potentially a naming for them, but that, like you say, it could be years away, right?
It would be the big feature of the place, so it would be pretty significant.
I agree, but again, that could be many years away, unfortunately.
The only thing I could think of in the meantime is if we put like a stone there saying future site of the Dendoff Sportsplex or something. Just, that's my thoughts I had on that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, well, where do we want to go with this? I mean, I think Rotary, they haven't asked again, but I know they'll be happy for us to get back to them. We wouldn't name the amenities building after the Dendoff, so I think let's break this down. Are we all comfortable with the amenities building being named with Rotary? Ms. Gilmore?
Can we go back? We need to actually make a resolution to have by resolution is how we name our recreation amenities.
Oh, you need a resolution?
Yeah, we need something to that effect. Yeah, that we recommend to council.
Somebody saying that we will be naming the recreation assets by standing resolution.
Does that give you, Ms. Fraser, what you need? Do you want more detail?
So basically what you are looking to do is have a standing resolution that recreation and amenities are named on a case-by-case basis. Is that?
Yeah.
And with no criteria per se. Okay, so I think the recommendation to council would be that recreation assets be named basically on a case-by-case basis, and that this be a standing resolution.
Can I get a mover? Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Antonelli. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, and now are we comfortable, or would somebody like to put forward a motion that the soccer field amenity building be named for the Rotary contribution?
I'll make that motion.
Seconded by Councillor Noble. Any further discussion on that part? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So then the next part of the conversation would be, do we consider naming the fields after the Dendoff? And to Councillor Craddock's point, is that significant enough or symbolic enough? Or do we look at something like Councillor Noble's suggestion where we put a stone or something that says future site of? Which would be fun to put up, because I'm sure the whole community would all of a sudden jump up and go, "You're building a pool? When?"
Well, I was going to say we call it the Dendoff Aquatic Center. Just
One day. On the bottom it says one day. Councillor Craddock.
Well, I mean, if we're considering putting a rock up saying future site of the Dendoff Recreation Complex, why can't we put a rock up now saying you're on the land donated by the Dendoff family for recreation purposes? We could do that today, and then we can recognize them immediately for their contribution.
Well, this would be immediate. Like the stone suggestion is something we would do sooner than later. It would be fairly immediate.
Yeah, but I think we all understand that in the situation we're in, just to be able to afford to pay for a recreation complex on a yearly basis is 10, 15 years down the road. I'm looking for an indication today of their contribution today.
Yeah. Anyway, go ahead, Councillor Antonelli.
Oh, I was just going to say, perhaps on the stone, we should also write pending further donations.
Worth a try. Councillor Noble.
I was just going to say, I don't see a reason we couldn't do both. Something acknowledging their donation of the land, and then maybe a rock or something saying that it's a future site.
And it could say both, and the future site of, or the site of the future so-and-so complex. Land donated by and the future site of, or something like that. We could come up with something that's representative.
Future site of, and then 3 periods.
Yeah.
And don't forget to put the GoFundMe link on there.
So is that something we want to consider? Is talking to the Dendoffs about acknowledging the, putting some sort of stone or signage up that acknowledges that the land was donated by them, and that it will be one day the future site of the Dendoff Recreation Complex. All in one.
I'll move that.
Okay.
Sorry, so you're recommending to council that signage be placed?
No, I think before we do that, we should talk to the Dendoffs. So I think we should, from here, that staff correspond or connect with the Dendoffs and
suggest the following.
Yeah.
So the committee is
Recommending to council that staff follow up with the Dendoff family.
We can just do that the committee can direct us to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so the committee directs staff to connect with the Dendoff family to discuss naming, recognizing the land donation and site of naming the future complex site for them and putting signage up to represent that. That's a great motion. Go ahead, Councillor.
I'm just wondering with that, if we're giving administration direction to do that, is this also a good time to ask them if they would be amenable to removing the name Sabre off the road?
And acknowledging it that way.
And just saying, look, we want to look at the whole site because it's such a investment to the community, and we don't think the road Sabre means much to the local people. Can we remove that name and go with the whole site? I think that conversation would be very well looked at and accepted at that point in time.
Ms. Gilmore, did you have any thoughts on that?
I think it makes sense to do it together, only because of the history, a little bit around that road. We are bringing forward a letter to council on the 20th that we've recently received. So I'm not sure of the timing. I think it makes sense to do it together. I think
so
it makes
too.
sense.
And I think it could be definitely, presented as that going, as Councillor Craddock said, Sabre Way was a way of acknowledging, but now in retrospect, does it truly acknowledge the Dendoff family and everything they've donated? And we feel that naming, recognizing the land that was donated and the future site complex is a better way to really pay tribute to their donation. And then there's the whole side of the functionality of the road and all that sort of thing. So we feel it's a win-win, but ultimately gives them better recognition for their contribution.
I like that. If there's a motion needed, I'll make the motion or direction.
So was that clear enough for that motion? Do you want to read it back, Sheena?
I can't.
Ellie, you got it?
That'd be directed to follow up with the Dendoff family to discuss naming and land donation recognition, including the naming of Sabre Way.
Yeah, perfect. Moved by Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Craddock. All in favor, opposed, motion carries. Business license bylaw amendment. Ms. Fraser is going to take us through this report. I did want to say at first, I've been thinking about this. There is one part that I feel I'm going to declare conflict. I don't think it's a big conflict because this is business license bylaw captures so much, and this is just a small part of it. But the portion about food trucks and that I own not only part owner of a food truck and a bricks and mortar building, so I think I'll step out for that section of the conversation and just remain here for the rest of the bylaw conversation. So I'm not sure who's going to take the chair.
Councillor Noble.
Councillor Noble, you'll be taking the chair when I step out for that part of the conversation. Yeah. So with that, I'll pass it to you, Ms. Fraser.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. So just to give you a little bit of background, in 2018, the business license bylaw was updated and a new bylaw was presented and adopted that addressed a number of administrative adjustments, along with updates to reflect a new category of short-term vacation rental. Shortly after that, the council moved forward with zoning and work related to cannabis production and retail. And so in 2019, in early 2019, to reflect those two new uses as business within the business license bylaw, there were, we needed to update the business license bylaw, and then there were also some minor amendments that were made for efficiency purposes. In order to keep it simple, we simply repealed the 2018 bylaw and brought in a new bylaw in 2019, because then it consolidated all of the information and made it easier to read. In the fall of 2019, we created further amendments to the business license bylaw. In particular, council may recall, we established that business license fee of $75 for business license applications received after October 1st and before December 31st. And that was in recognition that we do receive business license applications in the later part of the year, and it only seemed appropriate that rather than have to pay the full $150 amount, that they could pay a portion of that amount. So it's basically 50% of a business license. So if a business license were to be like under the cannabis retail, it's a $5,000 permit fee for a business license. If they were to open up after October 1st, it would be $2,500 for that for the rest of this year, and then it would be $5,000 starting in January. So we constantly are looking at our bylaws as the committee is aware to improve and adjust depending on what is happening and new legislation that comes through or new ways of doing things. So we have looked at it, and result of further review, there became a need to provide more administrative adjustments to assist staff with the implementation and provide further clarity and ease of understanding some of the requirements, because some of the language was a little bit awkward in the way it was written. So several amendments are being recommended, and with the committee's permission, I'll review them now. What I did is attach for your information and for ease of seeing what is being proposed, consolidated bylaw. A consolidated bylaw is where we take any of the amendments and put it into one bylaw. It's not the official bylaw. Obviously, the amending bylaw would be the official one, and the parent bylaw would be the official one. But in order to make it easy for people to find on our website, we consolidate all the amendments into one main bylaw. And you'll see this on a number of our bylaws on the website if you do a search. So by using that bylaw, I wanted to it gave me a better ability to show the committee where the changes that we're proposing are being made. So first of all, under the definitions, we had a section in the bylaw. We have a section in the bylaw that addresses mobile vending, or what we called previously, let me just see here. We called it temporary or mobile vending, I believe it was. And it addressed, it was in essence a food truck, or street park, mobile, or temporary vending, and that included a food truck. But the bylaw actually never had a definition of food truck, and so what we are proposing is that the definitions be amended to actually include a definition of food truck, which aligns with our zoning bylaw, which does permit that type of use. Also, updating the definition for independent contractor. Council may recall that that was one of the amendments that we brought forward last year to accommodate those people who do work for the village, but are doing a small little tiny project, or they're facilitating a recreation program like soccer tots or badminton and that kind of thing. Under our bylaw, anyone who does work for the village is required to have a business license, but in those cases, these people might only be making through the work that they're doing a couple $100 or $300, and to have to pay $150 for a business license. Council was supportive of making that change. But now that Rec Services is under the village and we're moving forward, we sort of looked at it and would like to broaden that definition to include not just recreation services, but the village at large, which will give us some flexibility if we are going to hire somebody to do just like a one-off small little project. These would be independent contractors, so not somebody who has a company. And then we did a small update to temporary commercial vendor to include a mobile store. So those are the definition updates. There are a number of other updates on part 5 and part 6, which are mostly housekeeping to just provide some clarity in the language and make them easier to read. Doesn't change the intent of the initial bylaw at all. Part 8, we're making a slight change, or recommending a slight change, to remove the requirement of a business to send us correspondence notifying us of their closure. One of the challenges that we've been met with is we have a lot of non-resident business license bylaws, or business licenses, and those are for people who are coming in, doing contract work, or here for a short period of time, and then they leave. And what we've been finding is that we end up having them on our business license listing, and then when we send out the renewal invoice, often they don't bother contacting us to let us know they've gone, they've left town, or they've closed, and no longer doing business. But under our current system, unless we get a letter in writing from them, they remain on the books as an operating business. And so one of our challenges has been trying to track these folks down, to ask them for a letter to tell us that they're no longer doing business, and it just becomes quite administratively heavy and doesn't really accomplish very much because they're not here and doing business anymore. Likewise, there's some businesses that we know are gone and have been gone for several years, but because we haven't received a letter in writing, they are still considered on the system. And so we're trying to simplify that and make it easier by removing that requirement. And if a business doesn't renew their business license, it's presumed that they're closed. If we find that they're operating, they will be either asked to pay the penalty or the late payment fee, or if they refuse but continue to operate, then we would move forward with enforcement through ticketing as may be required. Part 9 is basically a wording clarification. Part 10, we've made some adjustments, which is the business license fees. We've created some language around clarity. And we've also established in response to business operator feedback, the ability to, if you have a business operation, but you do the same business in more than one location, and this is mostly relevant out to the industrial park, where we've got some businesses that have more than one location, but they do the same thing. If they have 2 or 3 locations, their business license fees start to get quite high if they're paying for each location. So in looking at that, we investigated what other communities are doing, and a lot of the communities that we looked at allow for an auxiliary business license fee. So what that means is the main business would pay the $150 business license fee, but all of their auxiliary locations would just pay a smaller amount. And we looked at what other municipalities are doing, and a lot of them sort of pick a $50 rate. And so we felt that this would be a positive way to move and in helping those businesses out. So there's some businesses that would be paying almost $450 in business license fees, but in this case, with this change, they would be paying like $250. And then, yeah, so there's that change that we're proposing, which, as I mentioned, is quite common. And then under part 12, we are changing the penalty, again, as a result of response from business operator feedback. Under the current bylaw, if you pay after January 31st, the penalty is 100%. So that's quite extensive. That's quite a big penalty, and it's a penalty that's actually more than a ticket for doing business without a business license. So what we heard back was from the business community that this is punitive and unreasonable. And we did further research, and many communities do offer a late penalty option, but it's at a much lower rate. And the idea behind that is to encourage people to pay their business fees in time, but if it's late, it's not such a punitive hit. And so we've adjusted it from 100% down to 25%, which we feel is more reasonable. And our hope is that it will continue to encourage businesses to pay for their business license after or before January 31st. We've provided some minor housekeeping changes again to fix and make the language a little bit easier to read in part 13. And in part 14, which is the street, park, and mobile or temporary vending section, we have made some adjustments and added to the requirements of what those types of operators would have to provide the village. And again, this is in reviewing other municipalities' bylaws that have quite a extensive and robust street like food truck operations. Particularly what we felt from a staff perspective needed to be added to the requirements is that the business will advise the village how they will comply with the wildlife attractants bylaw, the sign bylaw, and the noise regulations bylaw. We also added the definition of food truck. We also added in a couple of other little small requirements, like not operating within 6 meters of a fire hydrant and providing comply with all the conditions of the health authority and the village fire department. That's something that we didn't have before, and felt that it was important to put in an element there. And we kept the only one food truck license will be issued per parcel of land as it currently is. But under the current bylaw, we only issue a maximum of 5 mobile vendor licenses a year. And but that was actually related just to food trucks, and it was kind of confusing. But when you started to read the language of the bylaw and interpret it as it was meant to be written, we were allowed to issue 5 food truck business licenses, but we could issue as many mobile vendor licenses as we wanted. And so what we decided to do is just propose that the limit on the number of food trucks be removed. We don't have a plethora of applications for that, because right now the village doesn't offer the opportunity to vend outside private properties. So that would remain the same. And if we did ever want to move into opening the door to create a food truck program, such as Squamish has done, we would bring back to council a proposal of how that would work and identify areas that those food trucks could be located. So that's just a bit of an update, and mostly fixing some of the language in that section as well. And then there were a number of other changes that we made to part 16, 17, and 20, which is around community events and special events and the farmers market. Under each of those sections, those agencies were required to provide us with their insurance. That is already required as part of their park use permit or their special event permit. So it was a duplication of our efforts. So we just removed that as a business license requirement. They can't get a business license till they get their park use permit or their special events permit anyway. So those things would fall over, and it just removed that duplication. And then finally, we made an adjustment to part 19 around the exemption by adding the language that the independent contractor will not only be hired by the community center, but the village and as a whole. And then fixed up some other little minor stuff under enforcement or the penalties section, and adjusted Schedule A to reflect the changes that we are proposing with the auxiliary business, the late payment fee. And we also added in, if a business license is either denied or withdrawn, and there's been an inspection, they would have to pay cover the cost of an inspection, which is $100, because that covers the cost of our staff going out for that inspection, which usually includes the building inspector and the fire chief. So those are the proposed changes. I probably went too fast.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Fraser. That was good. Okay, so I'll open it up. Any questions or thoughts? Councillor Craddock.
Yeah, I've got 4 items, if you don't mind, Mayor Richmond. First of all, good report, but I see there's no number 15. Did number 15 get forgotten through this on page?
Sorry, number 15, part 15?
Yeah, there is no part section 15.
14.
We go from 14 to 16?
Well, there's a few.
Part 15 is trade contractors.
It didn't get changed. The only thing that in this report are those that have changes to them.
Yeah. Only the sections of the bylaw that we're making amendment or proposing amendments to.
So
okay, thank you. Then on page 20, I would not be in favor of removing the 5 temporary vending licenses. That was very contentious when we put it in there.
Councillor Craddock, this is this discussion is the one that I will step out for.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. As she went through the definitions, it was fine. But now that
okay, I can go back to that one. I've got 2 others that you may want to be here for, Mayor Richmond.
Yeah, let's save that discussion till the end.
Okay. On page 27, just a question, because I don't see it in there. With short-term vacation rentals, does the property have to be owner occupied?
Yes, but that's in the zoning bylaw and that's where that sits.
Okay, that's good. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
And then on page 34, I couldn't see anywhere through there, and I might have missed it. So this is more of a question. Trailer licensing, I don't see any place in there where we require it has to be insured through ICBC or the provincial government. Should that be in there, or is that just presumed if you're hauling a trailer, it has to be on there?
Yes, because you would have to have it, you'd be pulling it by car.
Okay, and that's my question. Does it need to be in there?
Well, presumably they can't get it from A to B unless it's
Okay,
licensed.
and that's the only thing I saw in there that I saw was missing, so that's fine. And I'll go back to the other one once Acting Mayor Noble takes over.
We, just on that note, I mean, we could add in under 14.6 that they ensure their portable vending cart, trailer, truck, vehicle, or temporary stall we could put in is licensed. I could add that in.
I appreciate that. It just, there'd be no question about that. Thanks very much.
Yep, can add that in.
Thank
So
you.
we'll save section 14 till the end, and once we've had a chance to discuss any other comments on the rest of the sections. So is there anything anybody would like to add or ask questions about? I'm good with all the changes. I think they're thorough. Some of them are, as noted, housekeeping. I think the change in late fee is something that we've heard from a couple business owners. So I think that's a good change. So I think I'm happy with all those changes. So if there's nothing else on the other sections, I will step out and give Councillor Noble the chair, and Ms. Gilmore, just fire me a text. Okay.
Will do.
Acting Mayor Ms. Noble, if I might. I want to go back to that on page 20. When we originally put this in a lot of years ago, it was very contentious to even go to 5. I'm concerned that we're going to remove that. The discussion that took place then and should be thought about now is food trucks do not pay property taxes, although they're on private property that do. And at that time, we felt that a lot of these vendors that operate that way take away from a lot that local businesses put into the community as far as bricks and mortar buildings, staffing, helping out in the community for recreation purposes, etc. So I would be against us removing that 5 business license scenario that we have in here.
Councillor Zant?
I essentially had the same question as Councillor Craddock, and not knowing the history behind it, but I had the same concerns. Really good point about the property taxes. But one of my concerns about that was having the 5 licenses seems fair, but I'm wondering if we did open it up to an unlimited number of licenses, what my fear is the impact that would have on the local businesses, where they are paying their, I believe there's a certain amount you have to pay for parking, up in the tens of thousands of dollars these vendors would not have to pay for, but also just the local effect we would have on our local food vendors. So I agree with Councillor Craddock. I wouldn't support taking the 5 out. I would prefer to see that left in. Thank you.
Ms. Gilmore?
Yeah, I just wanted to provide a little bit of information. I'm not disputing either of what you were saying. I think that's fair. $300 is an increased fee. We know it's not significant to actually compensate for the property taxes and utilities that they're not paying. That was one of the reasons that food vendors have a higher business license. The other thing is we typically haven't reached the maximum of 5, which is interesting. But if that's something that the committee wanted to recommend to council, I think some of this was done for fairness because there were unlimited amount of mobile vendors, but only 5 food truck vendors. Is that correct, Ms. Fraser?
Yeah.
So I think maybe that was some of the rationale behind it. Should there be equity between the two of those groups? Or we allow one to continue with unlimited amount of licenses and limit the food truck portion? The other thing is that they do have this is just, again, additional information. They have to obviously get permission of the landowner, and then they have to provide their own, get a consent to using the washroom that may be there. So there are extra hoops they have to follow in, but I'm not disputing any competition for the current businesses that we have in town.
So yeah, if I can just provide a little bit of context, if you're okay, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
So when a food truck vendor comes in to apply for a business license, they have to have a location. They have to have a written letter from the property owner to saying that they are allowed to be on that. They also have to provide access through that to a washroom facility in some way. So in most cases, it has to be a close relationship to a building that will have those facilities. Only one food vendor can be on a piece of private parcel. And we do not give food vending licenses for village streets. So we don't have lots of locations. It's very, very, very limited in number of locations that a food truck can actually operate from, because it has to be a bare piece of land or affiliated with a business. So that was one of the reasons too. It just seemed to limit. We haven't had a lot of complaints or issues. It was just an idea, with the idea of looking forward to the potential of, if we did go to a food truck program, what that would look like. And one of those challenges would be that we have a limited number on the food truck business licenses. But staff is, appreciates where council is coming from on that. And that is an easy one to keep in the bylaw, no problem at all.
Councillor Craddock, did you have more comments?
Yeah, just wanted to thank you very much for that clarification. What we've currently got is business license establishes a limit of 5 temporary vending licenses per year. And that is not broken down into food trucks or any other services. Is that correct?
Well, that was part of the problem, which is why we added the definition of food truck, because the temporary vending, the temporary commercial vending definition does not include food truck. And so this is where the section of the bylaw didn't align. We had only 5 food trucks, and we referred to it as food truck or portable food vendor, but we didn't have a definition for portable food vendor. We had a definition of temporary commercial vendor, which were 2 separate things. And so that's why we broke it down, and we actually created a definition that aligned with the zoning bylaw, because the business license bylaw did not align with what the zoning bylaw uses were allowing. And it had this confusing part where there was no limit on mobile or temporary commercial vendors, but there was a limit on the portable food vendors. So I think if you look at the bylaw itself, and if you look at what was crossed out from that section before, sorry, I just have to look at it here. It was a maximum of 5 portable food vendors will be licensed in a calendar year, but under the mobile store was a different type of use or different type of license. So that's what we're trying to fix. And that's why we just thought we would just open it up. But we can be specific on the food vendors, and we could be specific on the mobile, on the what would now be called a temporary commercial vendor. It's complicated. I don't know if I explained it very well.
Well, I think it is complicated, and it opens up a bigger conversation. All of a sudden, I've always been in the thought process over the years that we allowed 5 total licenses, whether it be food truck or commercial, and that's all we wanted in the community. I guess I've never sat down and really re-looked at it since that conversation back in 2012 or 2013. But I don't want to open up the community for unlimited amount of food trucks and or commercial. So I don't know what the rest of council's feeling is, but I'm almost at the feeling that 5 temporary licenses would include food trucks and commercial operation.
Okay, so one of the challenges we
Dr. Ryan.
had was we had the food truck over on the Lilwat lands, and then we had the fruit stand come in. So if we limit it, and there was another element of it too, is the mobile store, which the fruit truck would be, because the limit of one per parcel doesn't apply to the temporary commercial vendors. We were able to allow the temporary commercial vendor, being the fruit stand, and the food truck or the coffee wagon on the same land. So by limiting, yeah, we can make adjustments and figure it out and bring back, or else we limit the number altogether of food and temporary commercial vendors to 5 licenses at all, and just apply it to both of them. So it'd be a total 5 for both.
And that's what I would like to see happen. So I would support that if other people, I'd like to hear from the other councillors though.
Councillor Zant and then Councillor Antonelli.
I was just going to just comment that I agree with Councillor Craddock. I would just, like I said, keep it the way it is.
So 5 portable, 5
Total.
5 we'll call it a food truck or temporary vending licenses in total
Yes.
for the year. Okay.
Yes.
Councillor Antonelli.
Yeah, I just think that I can't really imagine exactly what businesses we would be prohibiting with that 5. I think it doesn't really explain what exactly we'd be including. I could see, okay, maybe we don't want more than 5 food trucks. That could be getting a little busy, but what else are we excluding with that? So maybe it's a summertime clothing market stall, and it's really difficult to get clothing in Pemberton. So wouldn't that be a good idea to have that? So I don't know. I just feel like we might be excluding things from Pemberton that we haven't considered yet. Some innovators might come to town or spring up out of the pandemic because we need things more locally. That's just what I'm thinking.
You could consider expanding it to maybe instead of 5 to 7.
7.
And see, I mean, we can see, we don't get overwhelmed. We have lots of people inquiring about food trucks, but it's a big investment for people to make, for sure. So right now we have 1, 2, 3 food truck licenses that we've, if you were to call it a food truck license, that's what we've issued 3. And then we have, we issued 1 temporary commercial vendor license for the fruit fellow. And other than that, that's all we've had. But we have had a lot of inquiries because I think people get an idea in their head. But I think the reality of actually running it is a little bit different.
That was a question I had for you, actually. Do people often get the license and then it doesn't show up? And meanwhile, that license is tied up?
Yes. So if somebody holds that license, they hold it until until the following year if they don't renew. So, but we haven't had that situation. What we have had is because only one only one food truck is per property. We have had vendors in the past, or food truck operators in the past, have tie up 2 locations. So they would have 2 of those business licenses. So one food truck would have a location, say out at the entrance of town on a piece of property, private property there, and they'd have a location in town at on a piece of private property here. So that would be 2 licenses, which means there's only 3 licenses available for the year because they hold those licenses.
So would that be covered with the new modification where you only pay $50 for multiple locations?
No, it wouldn't. That auxiliary fee would not apply to the food truck or temporary vending. We'll have to address that in the bylaw, but yes, that has to be, that would not apply because they don't, I mean, the idea behind them having to pay more for a business license is because they aren't paying taxes and they aren't paying utilities and they don't pay the infrastructure. And most of these food trucks,
Right.
you have to keep in mind too, really only operate maybe 5 months of the year, depending on where they're located, except for one that's year round.
Okay, Councillor Craddock?
Yeah, so just through to Sheena again. So the pizza truck that services both the Pemberton Brewery and the Beer Farmers, they're paying for 2 licenses, is that correct?
No, the Beer Farmers is outside our jurisdiction, so we don't, and the regional district doesn't have a business license program. So they have a business license with the village for the industrial park location.
Okay, thank you. And just for other people's knowledge, just going back a number of years, part of the reason this came up, there used to be a time where the old high school was in town, where we'd have people, especially with tools and that type of thing, that went directly against the hardware store, would come in for a Saturday afternoon, sell a bunch of tools and stuff, and then the next day would get a call from the owners of the hardware store complaining that we were allowing this to happen. So that's part of the reason why I'm a little hesitant to approve any more than 5. We've got people in the community that put a lot of dollars into the community and bricks and mortar and staffing to see a lot of profit goes out the door in a short period of time. So like Councillor Zanta said, I'm going to stick with the 5.
5? And that would be applied to both food truck and mobile vendor total, or the temporary commercial vendor.
Correct.
Yeah, so 5 total food truck and temporary commercial vendor.
Correct. Do you want a motion on that?
Sure.
I'll make the motion.
All in favor? Did I skip a step?
So what we'll do is I'd like to be able to bring this bylaw back, forward for readings on October 20th. So we'll incorporate, what I'll do is maybe the resolution could be that staff incorporate the changes discussed, including the license, the addition for the requirement to show a license on the trailers, that it be 5 total food vendor and temporary commercial vendor licenses per year. And I think those were the only 2 changes, were they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, would anyone like to make the motion?
I'll make the motion.
Ed, seconded by Ryan. All in favor?
You forgot discussion.
Oops. Oh, any further? Okay, backtrack. Any further discussion? Thanks, Amika.
Yeah, I'm okay with that, but I would like council to know if there are people who feel like they want to come forward and there isn't room in the program for them, so that we're aware if anyone's being turned away and if there's some innovative ideas we really need to be considering.
So do you feel we should keep case-by-case basis after the cap? Or how would that
No,
look?
just
We actually can't.
just
Can't, okay.
No, just let us know if anyone's being turned away, and
I will.
we should be having further discussion. That's all.
I think that that's where staff would bring back and say, we've had, you know, maybe we've had, you know, 4 or 5 people contact us and this is our challenge, and how would council like to move forward based on that challenge. And it's why we wanted to have this conversation through this process right now, is to get a bit of a sense, because we have had a lot of inquiries, but as I did mention, inquiries are not necessarily application, they're inquiries.
Mhm.
We were trying to sort of be a little bit prepared if it should open, but this gives us a really good, solid way to work with people and let them know where we sit on all of this. And it will actually help us avoid some of the confusion by setting it out as 5 total mobile or food vendors, 5 total. That's helpful, because the previous bylaw was not clear.
Any further discussion?
I think you did an admirable job as filling in as the mayor.
I don't think so. I talk to more chickens than humans these days. I kind of fob my way through. Would anyone like to make the motion?
Oh, I think we just need, are we
Just
opposed?
the vote.
Yeah,
Oh,
I think we
all
already
in-
did. Yeah.
Okay, so
All in
all in
favor?
favor? All opposed? Seeing no opposition, the motion passes.
Perfect.
Very good.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It's going to help us at a staff level considerably.
Okay, thank you. And is Mayor Richmond there watching us through his black screen?
Nope. I've let him know we're ready for him to join again. Oh, there he is. Maybe he was.
I think he was there critiquing me being mayor. I'm sure of
A
it.
nice little snooze. Where did we get to? Do we still need to pass the other amendments, or did you wrap it all up there, Ms. Fraser?
It's all wrapped up.
Agenda.
Thank you.
Okay, that leads us to adjournment of committee of the whole. Motion to adjourn. Councilor Antonelli, second by Councilor Zant, all in favor. We're adjourned.